You may be seated. If you brought your Bibles along today, I would encourage you to get them out because we're just going to read through a story, and I'll make a few comments along the way as we go. I don't know if you've ever listened to Dr. Woodrow Kroll from Back to the Bible, but this is how he preaches. And so I'm just going to do my Woodrow Kroll imitation. We're going to look at the story of Ruth. How many of you are suckers for romance? This is one of the best love stories in all of the scriptures. So we just kind of want to look through this a little bit. And so we're going to take it chapter at a time. And if you're following along, you need to get your Bible about this, the way it looks about like this. Because Ruth is, it's the fifth book, right after the book of Judges. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in the country of Moab, he and his wife and 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, and they were Ephraithites. Now that's tough to say, but from the tribe of Ephraim, from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there, but Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died. She was left with her 2 sons, and these took Moabite wives, and the name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. Now here's my first little sideline. You've all heard of Oprah Winfrey. Her mother mispronounced the name on the birth certificate. Oprah was supposed to be named Orpah, not Oprah. Anyway, forget you heard that now. Okay. These 2 took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And when they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Then she started to return with her daughter-in-laws from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had considered his people and given them food. And so she set out from the place where she had been living, she and her 2 daughter-in-laws. And they went up on their way to go back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-laws, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find security, each of you, in the house of your husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. And they said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. And even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they were grown? Would you then refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, it has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." Then they wept aloud again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. So the 2 of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" She said to them, "Call me no longer Naomi," which means pleasant. "Call me Mara," which means bitter. "For the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi pleasant when the Lord has dealt harshly with me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me." So Naomi returned together with Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, who came back with her from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. We get the background of the story in chapter 1. There's tragedy in that Naomi is married to her husband who dies when they go to Moab in order to survive the famine. Her two sons, this is the joyous part, they take wives, but they take Moabite wives. But her two sons die as well, and this leaves Naomi now destitute. She hears that the famine in Israel has lightened, so she is going to return back to her kinfolk. And her two daughters-in-laws decide that they want to go back with her, but then Naomi tells them that this is not a good idea, and she urges them to go back home. And so then we get a little bit of an understanding of Levirate marriage. And the way Levirate marriage works is that if a woman dies childless, so that there is nobody left to inherit the family estate, then the closest next of kin, who is usually would be a brother-in-law, is to marry her, raise up a child, and that child is to be considered the child of the dead husband. That way the inheritance stays within the family. Well, Naomi explains that she's too old to get married. She's not going to have any more sons who would marry Ruth or Orpah. And so she's releasing them of any family obligations that they have to her or to her dead sons, their husbands. And so Orpah takes her up on this. And so she's going to go back to her people and probably is going to marry somebody. But Ruth makes this impassioned plea, this story that you've heard numerous times, that your people will be my people. I'm going to go where you go. I'm going to die where you die. And it's almost as though Naomi says, fine, just do what you're going to do. And so they head back. And so they head back to Bethlehem. Now, Bethlehem in these days is a town of about 300, half the size of Benton. What do you know about small towns? You guys know everything about small towns. Everybody in a small town knows everybody and knows everybody's business. And so when Naomi shows up with her daughter-in-law, Ruth, who is a Moabite, they are the talk of the town for days. And so they ask Ruth or Naomi, what happened? And Naomi tells them the sad story. So sad, in fact, that she says, don't call me Naomi anymore. Call me Mara, because the Lord has dealt bitterly or harshly with me. How many of you can identify with Naomi? There's a lot of us here who can identify with her sadness, with her loss, with her feeling that God has treated her bitterly. But what I would remind us of, and we'll find this in the story, is that Naomi has forgotten two things. She thinks that God has abandoned her. God has not abandoned her. And she does not yet realize what an incredible resource that she has in her daughter-in-law, Ruth. Now, what holds this whole story together is the Hebrew word chesed, which means steadfast love and faithfulness. So now we're going to see a little bit about this steadfast love and this faithfulness as we begin chapter 2. Now, Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a prominent rich man of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Now, again, this is a small town. Do you think that Naomi has forgotten who her kinsfolks are in Bethlehem? She's probably related to half the town, okay? But her grief is such that she can't think clearly anymore. So she has forgotten about Boaz. So she has this kinsman by the name of Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain behind someone in whose sight I may find favor." She said to her, "Go, my daughter." So she went. And she came and she gleaned in the field behind the reapers. And as it happened, she came to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Just then Boaz came from Bethlehem. He said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." Then Boaz said to his servant, who was in charge of the reapers, "To whom does this young woman belong?" He knows. Okay. The servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, "She is the Moabite who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, 'Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers.' And so she came. And she has been on her feet from early this morning until now without resting, even for a moment." Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Keep your eyes on the field that is being reaped and follow behind them. I have ordered the young men not to bother you. If you get thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn." Then she fell prostrate upon her face to the ground, and she said to him, "Why have I found favor in your sight that you should take notice of me when I am a foreigner?" But Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told me, and how you left your father and your mother in your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. May the Lord reward you for your deeds, and may you have a full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge." Then she said, "May I continue to find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, even though I am not one of your servants." At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come here and eat some of this bread and dip your morsel in the sour wine." So she sat beside the reapers, and he heaped up for her some parched grain. And she ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. And when she got up to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, "Let her glean even among the standing sheaves, and do not reproach her. You must also pull out some handfuls for her from the bundles, and leave them for her to glean, and do not rebuke her." So she gleaned in the field until evening, and then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. She picked it up, and she came into town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gleaned. And then she took out and gave her what she had left over after she had been satisfied, her leftover lunch. Her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean? And where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked and said, "The name of the man with whom I worked today is Boaz." Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed be he by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Naomi also said to her, "The man is a relative of ours, one of our nearest kin." Then Ruth the Moabite said, "He even said to me, 'Stay close by my servants until they have finished all my harvest.'" And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is better, my daughter, that you go out with this young woman, otherwise you might be bothered in another field." So she stayed close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvest. And she lived with her mother-in-law. Gleaning was the Hebrew Social Security welfare system. There is passages in Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy which give strict instructions to the Hebrews that when they harvest their fields, they are not to harvest to the end of the rows, they are not to harvest the corners, and if they leave a cloak or a tool in the field, they are to leave it so that the poor might come and have some place to work, be able to gather food for themselves, and to have able to provide for themselves. And the reason for this is that God said, "You were aliens and foreigners in the land of Egypt. So do not be like the Egyptians who abused you, but show compassion to to the aliens and the poor and the foreigners among you. And so Ruth knows that Naomi is depressed. But she can't stand around and stay in the house feeling depressed. And so she needs to go out and get a job and to start to provide for them. And so she tells this to Naomi, I'm going to go out and I'm going to start gleaning. And so Naomi gives her permission. So Ruth goes out and she starts gleaning. And here's the God thing here, is that she starts to glean in this field of Boaz. Boaz is described as being a man of chesed, of faithful, steadfast love. Now again, it's a small town. He knows who Ruth is. Ruth is a beautiful young woman. She's probably in her mid-20s. She has this tragic story of being a widow already. Boaz sees that she is working in his field, and he inquires about her, and he finds out that she has been showing chesed, steadfast love, to her mother-in-law. She didn't have to, but she is. And he also finds out that not only is she showing chesed to her mother-in-law, and that she is a beautiful young woman, but she is a hard worker. She has been working the whole day, the whole time. And so Boaz invites her to share lunch with him. And he gets to know her a little bit. And then when the day is done and Ruth goes back home and she has this huge amount of barley that she has gleaned in just one day, Naomi asks her, what did you do? And she tells her about this man that she met, Boaz. And so then Naomi goes, wow, this Boaz, he's one of our closest kin. And do you realize that he is showing chesed, faithful love, to you, to me, and to my dead husband, and to your dead husband. Faithfulness to them. Well, now, I think, this is my opinion now, okay? I think that Naomi is coming out of her depression. And I think she's going to start doing some scheming and matchmaking here. And so I think there is a budding romance. This chapter could also be called, Did She or Didn't She? Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, I need to seek some security for you so that it may be well with you. Now here is our kinsman Boaz, with whose young women you have been working. See, he is winnowing barley tonight in his threshing floor. Now wash and anoint yourself and put on your best clothes and go down to the threshing floor. Now who gets dressed up to go to the threshing floor, by the way? Okay. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. She said to her, all that you tell me, I will do. So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had instructed her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk, and he was in a contented mood, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of the grain. Then she came stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight, the man was startled, and he turned over, and there lying at his feet was a woman. He said, thank you, Jesus. No. What he does say, though, is, who are you? And she answered, I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are next of kin. He said, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. This last instance of your loyalty is better than the first. You have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. For all the assembly of my people know that you are a worthy woman. But now, though it is true that I am a near kinsman, there is another kinsman more closely related than I. Remain this night, and in the morning, if he will act as next of kin for you, good, let him do it. If he is not willing to act as next of kin for you, then as the Lord lives, I will act as next of kin for you. Lie down until the morning." So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before one person could recognize another, for he said, "It must not be known that a woman came to the threshing floor." Then he said, "Bring the cloak you are wearing and hold it out." So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley. And he put it on her back, and then he went into the city. She came to her mother-in-law, who said, "How did things go with you, my daughter?" Then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, for he said, 'Do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" She replied, "Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today." Boaz is probably in his mid-50s. He's probably about the same age as Naomi. Now, my suspicion, okay, this is my opinion, so take it for whatever you think it is worth. The barley harvest lasts about 3 weeks. The wheat harvest lasts about 2 or 3 weeks. Ruth has been gleaning barley and wheat in Boaz's fields. They have spent about 6 weeks together, probably sharing lunch. I think that Boaz has fallen in love with this young woman. But he's thinking he has no chance with her, that he is fighting above his weight class because she is young and she is beautiful. I think that Ruth has fallen in love with Boaz, but she thinks that she has no chance with him. She is a foreigner, a widow, and poor. But I think that everybody else around them sees this romance, and they are thinking, this solves all of the problems if we could get these two together. I think that Naomi is aware of this and realizes that this would solve so many of her problems. And so she says to Ruth, "We need to take care of your security. And the way we're going to do this is I'm going to have you go down and you're going to lie down beside Boaz." And so Ruth does. And when she lies down beside Boaz and he is startled and he wakes up, Ruth proposes to Boaz. When she says to him, "Put your cloak over me," she is asking him to marry her, to fulfill the role of next of kin, and to have a child by her who would then be considered to be her husband's, her first husband's child, to continue the inheritance. She doesn't know what Boaz is going to say. It's a leap of faith for her. Boaz responds by saying, "I am flattered. You could have gone after the young men." This demonstration of chesed, faithful, steadfast love, is even more impressive than how you have been treating your mother-in-law, your deceased father-in-law, and your deceased husband. And he says, there just happens, though, to be another kinsman who is closer to you than I am. If he will fulfill it, fine, but if not, I will. Chapter 4. No sooner had Boaz gone up to the gate and sat down there than the next of kin whom Boaz had spoken came passing by. You think? All right. So Boaz said, "Come over here, friend, sit down." And he went over and he sat down. And then Boaz took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. He then said to the next of kin, "Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab," everybody knows that, okay, they're all from the same small town, "is selling this parcel of land that belonged to our kinsman Elimelech." Now this is new information. Why is Naomi selling a piece of land now? Because she's arranging a marriage proposal. So I thought that I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me so that I may know, for there is no one prior to you to redeem it, and I come after you. So he said, I will redeem it. Then Boaz said, the day you acquire the field from the hand of Naomi, you are also acquiring Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead man, to maintain the dead man's name on his inheritance. At this, the next of kin said, I cannot redeem it for myself without damaging my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning the redeeming and the exchanging to confirm a transaction. The one took off a sandal and gave it to the other. This was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the next of kin said to Boaz, acquire it for yourself, he took off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have acquired from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon, to be my wife, to maintain the dead man's name on his inheritance, in order that the name of the dead may not be cut off from his kindred and from the gate of his native place. Today you are witnesses. Then all the people who were at the gate, along with the elders, said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together build up the house of Israel. May you produce children in Ephrathah, and bestow a name in Bethlehem. And through the children that the Lord will give you by this young woman, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And when they had came together, the Lord made her conceive, and she bore a son. And then the women said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without next of kin. And may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher in your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has borne him. Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the descendants of Perez. Perez became the father of Hezron, Hezron of Ram, Ram of Amminadab, Amminadab of Nahshon, Nahshon of Salmon, Salmon of Boaz, Boaz of Obed, Obed of Jesse, and Jesse of David. My opinion, there is a conspiracy that is going on here. I think Naomi is doing everything she can to arrange this wedding. The reason why I think that is because and I don't think Boaz and Ruth are in on it. I think they're playing a game with them. Because Boaz, he goes into town, and it just so happens that this next of kin happens to be there. And it just so happens that there are 10 men who are waiting at the gate in order to have this quorum that they need to have for this part of business. But not only that we read a couple of verses later that the whole town of Bethlehem has come out to watch and to witness what they know is about to happen. And so here's Boaz, and I think Boaz is worried. I think he's afraid that this next of kin will marry Ruth. And so he's very careful as to how he phrases it. He says, well, Naomi's going to sell some land. You're the one who actually has first right of refusal to it. And the guy says, sure, I'll buy the land. And I think Boaz just went, oh, darn it. And so he says, well, you realize, of course, so that if you take the land that you have to marry Ruth and you have to provide a child for her and so on and so forth. And I think this guy is in on it. And he goes, oh, well, shoot, that would damage my inheritance to my kids if I do that. And he starts to take off his sandal. Now, here's why I think that this is all a game, a joke that's being played on Boaz and Ruth. is because there is a change in tradition here. If somebody needs to perform a Levirate marriage and they refuse, the woman is to take his sandal from him and spit in his face and say, "You are neglecting chesed. You are not showing steadfast and faithful love to your kin." But instead, the story of Ruth and Boaz doesn't tell us that. It says that they take off the sandal as a sign of saying that they have done a transaction. That's not what's happening here. What is happening is they're playing a joke on Boaz. All along, everybody saw that this solves all of the problems. And so they play this joke on Boaz and they say, "No, I'm not going to marry Ruth. You are. Because you love her and she loves you. And the two of you are demonstrating what chesed is all about. The steadfast and faithful love of God." And so I think the whole town celebrates. And so then you get the epilogue. There's a wedding. We have wedding bells. We have a baby. We have the story telling us that Naomi goes from being pleasant to bitter to pleasant. And that Boaz, who probably thought that his chances of a marriage in family had passed him by, now finds himself blessed with a beautiful young wife and children. And Ruth, who probably thought that she was just going to be a foreigner in a foreign land her whole life, finds herself having a family and being adopted into the family of God. And notice who they tell her that she is to be like when they bless her. "May you be like Jacob and his wives, who brought the family of Israel." And then they mention this strange name, "May you be like Tamar." You know the story of Tamar? Judah, one of the 12 sons of Jacob, married. His wife died. He had 3 sons. His sons each died. They were married to Tamar. They did not fulfill their Levirate marriage vows to Tamar. Tamar does a very unethical thing, tricks Judah into sleeping with her, has a child. And Judah, when he finds out that his daughter-in-law is pregnant, wants to have her killed, which is his right. And she then reveals who the father of the baby is, which is Judah. Judah responds by saying, "She is more righteous, chesed, than I am." And so now they are linking Ruth with Tamar because of her faithful love and steadfast love. So what's the point of the story? First part of the story is this chesed tells us the nature of God. God did not forsake Naomi, did not forsake Ruth, did not forsake Boaz, and does not forsake us. Secondly, it gives us the line of David. We find out that David comes from a Moabite, and from David comes Jesus, the Messiah. And then the third thing that I think it does is it gives us a challenge. Can we be people of chesed? Can we show faithful, steadfast love to one another? Let us pray.